Welcome back to our channel, The Capitol Watch. Today, we bring you a gripping moment from Capitol Hill, where Senator John Kennedy isn't pulling any punches. This hearing just exposed a critical flaw in how our government handles public records.
Thank you all for being here. I listened to all of you with great interest. Professor, do you believe that people respond to incentives?
Thank you, Senator. I do believe that people respond to incentives.
Do you believe that what you allow is what will continue?
I suppose I do.
Okay. I listened to all of you talk about enhancing affirmative disclosure requirements, strengthening the presumption of disclosure. I listened to you talk about consultants. I listened to you talking about the need for a public interest balancing test. But those can be ignored just as easily as every other part of the statute. Why don't you just create personal liability for the person responsible for turning over the documents?
Certainly, Senator. There are systems, other jurisdictions around the world that do have, in fact, personal penalties for government officials.
Do you recommend it for us?
I don't think that we're at the point where we necessarily have to take such a step in order to drastically change the incentives that agencies.
Why not? I mean, all administrations stall and restall in turning over documents to the American people, don't they? Does anybody disagree with that? It's not a Democrat thing or a Republican thing. It's an executive branch thing, isn't it?
It absolutely is. I do not disagree with that. It is.
So why don't we hold the people responsible, personally responsible? I'm not saying not afford them due process. You may want to require bad faith with a reasonable, not an impossible definition of bad faith. I mean, if you want to solve this problem, why don't you just create personal liability, Mr. Howell?
I think that's a terrific idea. Right now, the mechanism to have liability is basically an attorney's fees, and those are rarely given out. So the government really is never forced to pony up.
Well, the employees don't care if the government gets hit with attorney's fees, do they?
Correct, and that's why the Department of Justice is willing to tolerate us suing them 100 times, because we all pay for their lawyers.
Look, we can write and rewrite statutes all we want to, but it is clear that people in the government are not responding to Freedom of Information Act requests in bad faith. Sometimes they need more time, but I'm talking about in bad faith. That's clear. And it happens on both sides. So instead of just rewriting new laws and new rules that they're going to ignore, why don't you just hold people personally responsible? What about it, Doctor?
In a tense Senate hearing, Senator Kennedy asks the simple but powerful question, do people respond to incentives? It's a rhetorical gut punch to bureaucratic complacency. From that moment, the tone was set. The focus? Holding government officials personally accountable for stonewalling Freedom of Information Act requests. Across administrations, Democrat or Republican, the executive branch has built a habit of delaying or outright ignoring document requests. Senator Kennedy argues that simply tweaking laws won't fix the problem. Why don't you just hold people personally responsible? Experts acknowledge that under the current system there's little incentive to comply. Legal penalties are rare, and even when attorney fees are awarded, it's taxpayers, not the actual officials, who foot the bill. Senator Kennedy goes further, suggesting a new approach: personal liability for officials who intentionally withhold documents. No more hiding behind bureaucracy.
I actually fully agree, and I would point out that there's a mechanism in the FOIA statute currently where if it turns out that there's evidence of an agency or an agency employee intentionally withholding documents without a reasonable basis, a judge could, in issuing that order, make that finding.
And when's the last time that happened?
Almost never.
Yeah, it hasn't happened in the history of ever, has it?
Yeah,
No.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
until Congress makes it very clear that we're serious about this, we're going to be equal opportunity pit bulls here and say, regardless of who is running the executive branch, you have an affirmative obligation to turn over documents. And if you don't do it, you're going to be personally liable. That's going to work, isn't it?
Well, I would hope so. Of course, as you know, as a former law professor, there are issues with, the executive branch claiming immunity for
I'm
these
not saying
employees.
deny them due process.
Right.
I'm not saying an ordinary negligence standard. I'm saying that if some person is being an obstructionist and you can prove it, they ought to be held personally liable.
Accountability isn't just a talking point, it's a necessity. Senator Kennedy's message is clear. If we want real transparency, we need real consequences. So what do you think? Should government officials be personally liable for withholding documents from the public? Let us know in the comments, like if you support government transparency, share this video to keep the pressure on, and hey, subscribe for more moments that matter.